Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 17 of Soulful Practices. We are currently in season 2, and our main focus for this season is really on empowering ourselves with the access to the soul medicines of love and compassion, both for ourselves and out to others. And we know we could definitely use that right now out into the world. And so the teacher in the quote that I brought forward for this episode is a quote that is from the teacher Tara Brach. She is a beautiful meditation teacher. She's a psychologist, and she's best known for her teachings on really helping us tackle some big quote unquote pain points within ourselves through developing of self-compassion practice. And she has a method out there that's called RAIN, which I will be sharing more about during this episode. She's quoted in saying that pain is not wrong. Reacting to pain as wrong initiates the trance of unworthiness. The moment we believe something is wrong, our world shrinks and we lose ourselves in the effort to combat the pain. Okay, so I love Tara's teachings. Let me just kind of marinate this quote again, and you can see it in the show notes below. But just let's walk through this again because this is a pretty big concept. And again, she's got tons of resources out there of how she works in this. I put her site in the show notes below. But here it is again. Pain is not wrong. Reacting to pain as wrong initiates a trance of unworthiness. The moment we believe something is wrong, our world shrinks and we lose ourselves in the effort to combat the pain. So when I listen into this quote, and I invite you just to feel into this quote right now, there's usually a little bit of what I call push me, pull me with it. Like some part of us is like exhaling, and some part of us is scratching our head and kind of giving it a little bit of a side eye. Tara's quote really invites us into exploring one of the key concepts of working with a love and compassion practice or intention setting practice. In order to accept or give compassion or love and kindness to ourselves or to another, one of the key components is really releasing that idea that when pain is present, that can be emotional pain, mental pain, physical pain, spiritual pain, all the above, that one, something is wrong, and that two, whether or not that thing should be happening or not the way it is. And so again, that whatever is happening is wrong. So it's either whichever words you want to put with it. One, either something is wrong because I am experiencing pain, or that whatever is happening shouldn't be happening that way, and therefore that is wrong. Either one of these thought processes really sets us up for potential shadow judgments and actions that really end up driving us subconsciously from that trance of unworthiness that she was talking about, right? Instead of coming through that doorway of compassion and love. Meaning that when we assume that either I did something wrong or somebody else did something wrong, and therefore they are receiving pain or punishment as a result. When we have any of that type of thinking going on, we are left with two choices. Our world shrinks. We either got to run away from it or we got to fight it to try to put things right and earn our way back into worthiness to be pain free. Ugh, can you just see how either one of these is just super problematic, right? And it really lends us into greater suffering and chasing solutions that might or might not be optimal for ourselves or for the other. So side note here, this is where I can get on a little bit of a soapbox, and I'm going to try super hard not to. I'm going to say a little bit about it and then I'm going to get off of it. Is that I totally 100% do not agree with the concepts, with the belief systems, with the point of view that has a lot of traction out there in the energy world, the spiritual healing world. A lot of very subtle shaming happens when we put this link together that says, we take this mystical law, thought creates form, right? And we distill it and we shove it into some version of we created our illness with a limiting belief or thought or something like that. And therefore, if we learn our lesson, we can unhook it and heal that illness, i.e., make it go away. This is such a massive Trojan horse shadow blame and shame tactic that is really running rampant right now. And honestly, it's one of the main things that I have to undo when I start to work with clients, because they are really stuck with this bulldozer energy saying, I need to find my lesson. This is happening for a reason. If I just can understand what I did to create this pain and suffering in my world, then I can, voila, de-animate it, right? I created it and therefore I can undo it. And that's the reason why this belief has so much traction out there in the world. It's actually a really shadow protective, egoic measure that is trying to control what's happening to us and around us. And so it's created this huge wrinkle in this law that's not really there, that if I'm a person who's struggling with something, that means if I have an illness, if I have a disease, if I have an adverse experience happening in my world, like a loss of a job or a relationship or something like that, that somehow I did something, consciously or unconsciously, that there is one belief system, a negative thing, there's something holding that together, that if I figure that out, if I go on this massive shadow detective thing, that then once I figure that out and I heal it and I release it, I will have earned my way back into good graces, right? I will have found the root of that illness. I would have pulled that up, and therefore all of that discomfort, all of that disease, all of that pain point in my life will dissolve with it, because I will have evolved myself to the next level. I am so sorry to say, but not sorry, my friends, that this is just a really slippery slope to walk down. What this does when we distill that down to, like, I'm having pain so that I can have a lesson, and if I figure out that lesson, the pain goes away. This thing takes out the whole idea that there are certain contracts, certain parts of our river of our life that we are slated to, on some, okay, maybe on some huge level, some part of me said, yes, I want to work on this, and this in this lifetime. I want to help liberate myself from yada, yada, yada. I want to be able to blah, blah, blah. Okay, sure. Put that in there. However, when we distill that down into, if I figure this out, and we do what I call a vending machine effect with that, like if I figure out how to have the money for A5 and I push A5, then I should get this. When we do that, we are really locking ourselves into just trying to alleviate the symptoms. And that might not be what healing truly is going to look like. We don't know how that healing is going to come forward, but I do know that as I begin to free myself up from shadow beliefs, limiting beliefs, shrinking my world, getting stuck in either running away from it or trying to combat it, right? When I free myself from that, then I'm working and loving myself in holism, right? I've gone from separation to unity within my system, honoring of myself and these different aspects of myself and therefore others, right? And being willing to consciously choose how I want to show up in my life, no matter what hardships and heartbreaks might be present for it, whether it's perfect or imperfect. I can release all of that, having to earn myself into the keys to the kingdom, and I can embrace my environment. And then healing really becomes about, am I living in alignment with my heart and my soul? Can I feel free, balanced, and moving from love, even in the midst of things going up and down and all over the place, right? So the whole definition of healing changes when we accept a piece of what Tara's bringing us into with this quote, which is that pain is not wrong, right? That in itself makes that whole entire belief system kind of comes down. Okay, off my soapbox, back into the present of Tara's quote. So when we start with the assumption that having any type of pain in our life or in our body is equal to something being wrong, it leads us into a ton of undue suffering, a ton of inner angst through harsh shadow judgments, And then a lot of actual just separating ourselves from the medicines of love and compassion, right? So follow this line of thought for a little bit. If we buy in to that, when I feel pain, when I'm experiencing pain, that means that something is wrong, or i.e., I did something wrong and I need to figure out what it is. When I witness another person who is in pain, or what I experience in them as pain, that means they did something wrong and they are therefore trying to earn their way back. When I feel pressure or experience something that feels like loss or pain or pressure to me emotionally, mentally, or spiritually or physically, that means that somehow, somewhere, that person made a choice and did something wrong. And therefore, when we feel sorrow and emotional pain, that means we don't follow this trance. This is what the trance is really trying to say to us. That means that we don't deserve to feel happiness or joy, because at some point we did something wrong in a past lifetime, in a future lifetime, in a parallel life. I mean, in this lifetime, and we have to pay the penance. We have to work our way, earn ourselves back into quote unquote good graces. So therefore, if I'm ever experiencing anything other than bliss and joy and in my life, that somehow, some way, if I can't figure out what I did wrong, what belief system I need to undo, and therefore to free myself up and to earn my way back and to learn my lesson, I'm stuck. If I can't figure that out, I'm stuck in pain and suffering for who knows how long, all time and eternity, right? Can you feel how, when you kind of break these things down and you look at them, like that all of these tracks take us into crazy harsh judgments, and those judgments in self create more pain, more separation from hearing our heart and our soul being like, that's not what we're up to right now. There's something else here that needs our time and our attention, right? You're running past different messaging and opportunities and places to sit and be with, and let the pain itself talk to you and guide you, right? We're working and running and constantly moving and shaking, trying to find our way back into wholeness so that we can become pain free. But what if that whole train of thought is running down the wrong road faster? What if pain is not a punishment or a sign that something is necessarily wrong, right? What if we start from that starting place? If we let go of the concept that pain means something is wrong, then what is pain present for? What is it trying to do? Tara teaches in one of her talks about working with pain that to reframe the idea of pain from a somatic sensation of something is wrong to just a constellation of sensations and experiences that are trying to get our attention. And I like this reframe. I like this mindset shift, because it right there takes kind of an edge of pressure off of it, right? To like, oh, I got to get this right. I got to get this right. I got to stop this, right? So it steps us more into willingness. And this idea that pain is simply just a signal. It's a signal that is asking for, at the very least, a pause and an observation of what might be happening here. Getting curious about what might need to be tended to in some form or fashion. And a willingness to let that which we are observing guide us. So instead of our mind thinking, oh, I need to do da 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 da, or my mind thinking, see no evil, hear no evil, speaking of, and like just turning a blind eye and trying to numb ourselves out with it, with all these shadow numbing things, like, can we instead turn towards it? And so this is one of the big problems, right? Like, this is the problem, that our mind has been conditioned to run away or to fight, right? And be combative towards the pain. And she talks about that in this quote, right? Reacting to pain as wrong initiates that trance of unworthiness. And the moment that we believe something is wrong, the moment we attach to that word as wrong, then that automatically takes our point of what's driving us from our heart center, from that openness and that curiosity, and it runs up and comes into our mind, and then our mental being protectors. Now, those are what are in charge of us, right? That survival, fight or flight response to ourselves, all the way down into submission, numbness, and shutdown. And collectively, we're kind of taught to do this, right? We're taught to fear and to judge pain, especially if it's in the body, right? And then when it's more a mental, emotional pain, we have these weird things like no pain, no gain. And you can't, grow without pain, growing pains, and all these other, things that link pain in very detrimental ways to us. So, how do we work with these conflicting messages, right? So, just pause for a moment and think of all the ways that you were taught to be defensive when any type of pain shows up. Like, was your world created as in like oh, we don't talk about it, so we just kind of cover it up, suffer in silence, right? That people don't bring their pain forward to be witnessed or seen to themselves or to other people. We don't hold it together in community and get curious about what that is. Or was it seen as something that needed to be fixed? Right? Like that's drilled down, shadow detective, who done it, hands on hip, furrowed brow, what happened here? Who did what? Who did what, when, how, why, where, and what do we need to do to get something back on track? Right? Maybe it is like a mix of the two. So a little bit of there are certain types of pains that are okay for us to talk about, and then there are other ones that are taboo, right? That we are not going to talk about. And therefore you have to repress it. You have to shrink down and either blast through it, you know, put on those pull on those bootstraps and march on out there onto the field and repress it, or even bury it and exile it, right? Believing that there's nothing we can do, becoming a victim to the pain. So just think like culturally in your quote unquote tribe, within your family unit, within your friend groups, what is the current prevailing way in which pain is worked with? And what if we came through a different door? What type of choices would be available to us then? This doorway of love and compassion, right? The doorway is going to come with something like a sign over it that says seeking awareness, right? Awareness and acceptance is always the first steps of being able to tend to something, is that ability to tend towards and work with the pain and let the pain begin to guide us. So when we come through the doorway of awareness and acceptance, then we are actually saying, hey, mind, hey, protector, step back. We're seeking understanding first. What is happening here in and around this constellation of sensations and experiences that I am seeing as quote pain, right? What are the different ways in which we can put down those survival and personal blinders, so to speak, and just reacting and trying to alleviate the pain as quickly as possible or run away from the pain as quickly as possible? If we put that down, what other more ideal responses might come forward from the pain itself if we're willing to turn and look for it? So, wow, I'm saying this all pretty quickly and I'm saying this all pretty easily, right? But I do want to pause right here and just acknowledge like this is crazy hard because it goes against, like I said, the conditioning of our mind. There's a pill for that. You feel unhappiness, you feel sadness, you feel sorrow, you feel discontent, you feel disconnected, you feel this, you feel that, we got a pill for that. Right? There's a mantra for that, there's an energy medicine thing for that, like there's a rock for that. Like we have, it doesn't matter if it's allopathic, we've got our what I like to call lotions, potions, baubles, oh my, over here on the energy working side. Right? The spiritual side can say that this is the grace of endurance. Right? And so sometimes we can just numb ourselves out and separate ourselves. I know this is what I did when very early on in my journey, in like the first, what I would call 10 years of it. I was a master at this. I completely disassociated myself, who Michelle is, from my physical body. I completely 100% cut off myself from the pain because my physical body was in an immense amount of chronic pain. It was just migraines that were debilitating. If I let them, they would take me out for like a week at a time. They came in clusters. I'd lose months. My body itself was just really riddled in pain and all these other things like that. And at one point, I kind of took this weird conglomeration of like Eckhart Tolle's teachings and other stuff like that. And I did a very funny thing with them. I twisted them, kind of like what I talked about in the beginning of the podcast. I twisted them into mind over matter, thought over form. I took my yogic principles and I was like, I can control and have more control than my form. And I just went and just totally, completely disconnected it until one day, sitting in a doctor's office, a beautiful integrative doc asked me, like, hey, Michelle, can you tell me? And I think it was just this like checklist of a question. Can you tell me when you remember a day without pain? Because I was like trying to take on my migraines again. And it stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, can I remember a day without pain? I was like, no, no, I can't actually. I'm sorry. And she just kind of made a little note on the thing and then she kind of kept, going. But that answer haunted me. And I was like, I don't ever remember not having physical pain in my body. And the only way that I'm working with it is complete disconnection. And at this point, I'm 10 years into this. I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is a bypass I'm not supposed to be doing. This is not me being in union. This is me being in separation. I've just cut off a whole entire aspect of me. This whole physical body and emotional body, I just like chopped them off. And I was like, yeah, you guys are on your own. I'm going to work with just my mind and just like this little corner of my heart over here, because if I open too much of it, I'm sensing, and I don't want to do that. And this funky hybrid alternative that at the time I wasn't willing to talk to my soul. I was only willing to talk to like the spirit, the idea, the concept of me, just a little bit bigger than me, what some people might call that higher self, right? And so I was in this weird thing and I finally saw it. I finally saw that what I was doing with all the spiritual practices and energy work practices that I was doing, I wasn't actually changing anything in my system. I was building better walls. I was building better canals of how to work and what to stay away from. And these huge like danger, danger, don't talk to this part of you, don't talk to that part. And eventually I was like, that's got to all come down. But then the problem was, how do I work with this? I had constructed massive walls for a reason. I was stuck in chronic pain, inflammation. I had, at the time, autoimmune diseases going. I had a huge, like, back and forth between some latent encephalitis that was starting to flare, mixed with like chronic Lyme's and all those problems. I mean, this body was like a hot freaking mess. If I slowed it down, that's what I met. And I was like, yeah, I don't have that capacity to do that, because it felt like it would flood me and that's all I would be. And so I had this really great question when I started to learn some of these teachings that was challenging the way I had constructed of working with myself. And I was left with, well, then how do I work with the pain? And those are great questions. And here's some alternatives that I found on my journey that really did actually work for me, and they've been beneficial for clients. And so when we can feel a sense of pain and pressure, when we feel it, before moving right into something is wrong here and I need to go on a shadow detective, I need to cut it off and just breathe into it, call it an illusion, do whatever you want with it, just let it be there and come and go, turn it into a cloud and a wave or whatever you want to do. Before you do that, pause. Open to the energies of love, of compassion, of curiosity, so that you can turn towards whatever that quote pain point is and come first without seeking to try to change it. Because have you ever had somebody sit down next to you and they say, "Hey, what's going on?" And you can feel right away if you tell them anything that you're struggling with, they're going to try to fix it. They're going to try to move you. "Oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that bad. Have you tried this, this, and this?" They're just going to try to start moving you right away. They're not going to really listen to the nuancing of what's going on inside of you, or just maybe even you're not even looking to change it. You just want somebody to witness that you're just having a moment, right? And you just want somebody to be with you so you can breathe and say, "Yeah, this is what's really happening right now," right? And let yourself just see, get the space and the proximity to see what that is, right? When you have somebody sitting next to you who you can feel has an agenda, they want to either fix you or move you or get you from point A to point B or to see it differently, you're not going to say very much. In fact, you're probably not going to say anything. You'll be like, "Oh, no, no, it's no big deal. Hey, what's going on with you?" The flip to change the subject, right? And if by chance you decide, "No, I really do want some help with this," and you start talking and they start to do that, you shut down, you back off, or you got to blow up and be like, "Hey, that's not what I asked you to do. I just want to be seen," right? So that's step one when we feel this in our system, is not to come in with that energy, right? Not to come in with that energy of that agenda that says something is wrong here. Therefore, I've got to fix it, move it, do something like that. Instead, we want to let all that go. Take a nice little breath and then say, "I want to seek awareness first. I want to seek understanding. I want to let you guide me on what support you need, if any, of how to resolve and work with the pain second, but understanding first." And sometimes we don't even know how to start that conversation. Like, what would that look like to not just be like, "What can I do? What can I do? How can I fix it?" Right? So some of the questions you might want to kind of think about putting in your toolbox for that sacred listening is, what is contributing to this sensation right now? Some curiosity, like, I'm feeling this. What else is here, right? What different components might be present in and around my life right now, in addition to what I am saying the pain is rooted in? What else might be happening? What is the messaging? Can you share with me? What is that, right? What else is present in and around my body being at that time? Because other sensations are there too. And the biggest question is asking the pain itself, like, what would help support you in the best way possible? So notice I didn't even say in releasing and resolving and alleviating. That was not my leading question. It was, what is the best for you right now? And there is another key shift that happens when we agree that pain isn't wrong, is that we gain a willingness to really hold space for what we call therapeutic pain or pressure, right? And so this really came through my somatic work and training that I have, is like a willingness to be with those expressions, those somatic expressions of quote unquote pain. So first, this doesn't mean, I always like to pause right here, this doesn't mean we're masochists, right? Like, we don't need to go into the words of no pain, no game. I can endure this if it's going to get me yada, 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 here, here, here. And I also don't believe at all with the abusive ideas that have been mixed in with spirituality, from different wisdom traditions, that somehow enduring pain and showing that you can endure that pain is therefore showing that you have mastery over your body, and therefore equals more spiritual whateverness. No, thank you. I do not believe in either of those types of quote therapeutic pain or spiritual enlightenment. So to me, the concept of willingness to work with therapeutic pain is that I'm willing to move and turn in and witness that pain, open to its story for a reason that helps bring me into wholeness, right? So I'm not using it to hide in, to or to like grandize, or to just move. I'm opening to it as a way to feel and tend to the parts of me that are hurt, the parts of me that are feeling repressed, and the parts of me that at some point in time my system deemed that I was not able to work with for whatever reason. And I don't question my system. If it repressed something, if it pushed it to the side, if it said, yeah, we can't deal with this right now, and therefore we're gonna shove this into your left hip, or we're gonna take this and put this up in some pressure that's going to manifest more in your head area or your big toe or wherever the heck you feel that quote unquote pressure and pain in and around your system. You know, I believe that it did whatever it did at its original point for a reason. And I trust it. It was exquisite, it was beautiful, and I believe that that was true, that my system could not work with it at that time. However, that might not be true now, right? So when we're working with therapeutic pain, we're willing to witness the parts of ourselves that have been trapped, frozen, shoved in too much. There's a great definition for trauma that I absolutely love. It's like too soon. So stuff that happens to us before we're capable of working with it. There's too little support that was available to us in there, or we're asked to take on too much. And so therefore we don't have the capacity to work with the excess. Maybe one or two of those things we would have been able to work with, but when it's too soon, too little of support and too much, that creates an excess within our own system. And then that creates irregularities, right? Trauma adaptations and changes, and literal changes in which our nervous system, our cellular structures can function, right? Because they didn't have the support that they needed to clear, to dissipate, to tend to themselves, come on the backside and work through whatever list it wasn't able to work through during that moment where it was getting too much stuff in the system and it was getting overloaded, right? If it doesn't feel safe to be able to go back and tend to whatever happened in that traumatic moment, then it gets stuck. It's got to go somewhere. And pain is usually that trapped, frozen, excess, and irregular energies that our body had to put somewhere emotionally, mentally, and now it's got programs with it. And now it has adaptations and survival programs. And it doesn't slow down to say, hey, is this still a good program? It just runs it, right? And now it's compounding on itself. So often when we are asked to work with the pain, a lot of it is a willingness to breathe with it, a willingness to say, okay, I'm afraid, like I was, that this is going to flood my system, that I have put these walls up here and for a reason, right? And there was just this fear as I started taking down one brick at a time that all the bricks were going to fall and it was going to flood me and then I'd be lost in pain. But our system, if we follow it, it doesn't do that to us because it doesn't want to create more irregularities, right? Our heart and our soul really has a beautiful innate healing wisdom to it of which exact brick to go to, what thread to start to pull on, to unknot, to unwind, how to move step by step that our mind usually doesn't think of. Our mind usually does what I call the wrecking ball. And our heart and our soul, though, are guided very differently. Our body will guide us very differently. If we can open to those accessing those parts of our system, then our body's natural ability to work through, to unwind the pain that's happening within us and outside of us will naturally come forward. And yes, that can include outside and supplemental support. So while, yes, we all have a beautiful innate healing wisdom within us, and I firmly believe that, that's why I do things like this, right? We also can need support in this process. So if you find yourself in that one, just know that I've included in the show notes the international like helpline website. It's a beautiful website. It lists it by countries and all the different types of help that are possible. So whether that's a doctor, a therapist, a coach, an energy worker, a practitioner of your choice, whatever that is, there's some helplines over there, because I firmly believe that healing in connection and healing in safe connection, in attuned connection, in that sacred healing space is huge, in addition to being able to learn how to hold this space for ourselves like we are in practices and other things like that. Okay. So what makes the difference when we're willing to turn towards our system is that we no longer need to seek to cover up, to numb, to block, to avoid or the pain, and we can start to ask ourselves, how can we tend to that sources of the pain, right? We don't need to seek to avoid the pressure points either, right? Those self-sabotagey kind of distraction, avoidance, all those other dissociation things that happen. We don't have to do that to try to step outside of the comfort. We can titrate in and out of working with that. And we also no longer have to take out our pain or say, I need to give it to another to hold, right? All of a sudden, we don't have to try to offload our pain to somebody else's system. And what might that look like? Well, that can look like the outbursts, the ones where our system just kind of goes whoosh, and energetically, what it looks like is a bunch of like porcupine spikes coming out at somebody, right? The big puffer fish. It can look energetically like trying to literally like shoot an arrow or land a punch in somebody else's field. Like, I want this pain, this excess pressure discharged from my field, and I want it out into somebody else's, right? And or I want somebody to come in. That's another one that we often do when we're trying to just fix what's wrong, is we want somebody to just take that pain away from us. Either a person, a practitioner, a therapist, a coach, a doctor with a pill or a supplement. We want something, a beautiful little rock being to come in, something, an elemental to like bippity boo, ding, take that away from us. So all these questions of how we want to work with it can start to shift when we're willing to turn towards it, right? And when we're willing to release that something is wrong, to simply seeing it as an indication that something is happening. And how can we move compassionately into questions like, what is here? What needs our support right now? How would it like that support? And what actions would it like us to take to move in supporting it? All these answers are going to come from the pain itself. They're not going to come from our mind. They're not going to come from hands on hip, furrowed brows saying, what's here, what's wrong, and what do I need to fix? When we switch to this, though, we're willing to work with vulnerability. This is the other hard part, right? So when we stop pushing, or we stop running, or we stop trying to numb, then that means we're going to have to be willing to be raw. This is another version of therapeutic pain, right? And that vulnerability to discover that the pain itself can shift, can unwind, maybe increase itself a little bit more, maybe even release. We don't know what it's going to do. We release that trying to control it, and instead we let it start to guide us. So here's the hidden part of this practice. Okay, that almost, if you've watched other episodes, that I usually invite you into a hidden part, a hidden component that's in each one of these quotes. And this is the one that's inside this quote. That pain, especially trapped pain, chronic pain, painful experiences where those stories are a big part of our life, right? That something wrong happened. has happened, is happening. When that statement is linked together, that becomes our identity, right? When we become a link to our pain, that the pain is us and I am the pain, same thing. What happens is we develop a whole protective network around that pain. And those protectors will fight any attuned care that's coming to that pain to the death, right? They will, they will start to see that loving support, that love and kindness support that's coming to it as a massive threat, because that love and support and compassion can actually work through those barriers and start to tend to whatever is back there, to let it at least shift how our field is holding it and working with it. Even if it doesn't change the actual source of the pain, the way in which we're interacting with that, the way in which we're holding it, that we can liberate ourselves from, right? And these protectors know it. And so therefore they fight to keep the pain alive within us and active within us, to create as much of a presence up front and center of that pain and pressure within our life and create a very unhealthy codependent relationship with that pain. And so this is part of what Tara is referring to when she's talking about that trance of unworthiness. We believe that our worth starts to come from the pain itself, right? We start to believe that without this pain, we won't exist. We'll disappear, right? And so there's a trance of insecurity that's happening. We start to trust pain and pressure and how it helps us meet the world more than how we actually trust compassion and love. And we believe that pain is a greater protector than love in navigating the world within us and the world outside of us. And so to help break this trance, she developed her RAIN method. So RAIN is RAIN. I was like, oh, I hope I don't spell that wrong. And it's 4 easy steps. It's pretty close to the steps that I've already given you, but since we're in Tara's teachings, I thought I would just bring her words in and really kind of let it stay in hers. So the first one is recognize. When I feel pain, I want to actually recognize it. Instead of run from it or do anything else like that, like pause and seek to create more internal willingness and space for me to say, I wonder what's going on here, right? So that's step 1, that's the R. Then after R, we go to A, allow. A willingness within our system. Now that we've got more space, we've recognized it, we've taken on that observer witnessing role, now we need to allow ourselves a willingness to accept that this experience is actually here and to not judge why it's here, not to create a story with it. Oh, it's always here because my left hip has always been this way, and it's because when I was 4, I got hit in the, with a golf club from my friend who was practicing and that's why my hip hurts. When I do that, I've locked it in, I've shrunk my world down, and now that left hip can't be anything but that, right? It can't give me any new messaging, any new ideas, any other thing that maybe it's up to. So we want to take out that judgment. We want to allow that curiosity to be there. And now that that curiosity is there, we can do investigate. We can turn towards those sensations and experiences with interest, with care and curiosity, because the quality in which we turn towards something matters. Remember back when I said, like, imagine somebody sitting down with you, you really do want to talk to them. You really are like looking to have just that gain some more space by like sorting it out and before you even think about trying to do anything with it. But if you feel that person's going to go into fix it mode, you're not going to share, right? So we have to be willing to let the pain itself guide that investigation, that sorting. What is there? What is happening? Asking questions. And then once we have that, all of that out on the table, so to speak, nurture. Bringing that nurturing into it to tend to whatever is present, whatever we find, and that allowing and that investigating, to tend to it with self-compassion, with love, and with kindness. So a couple key components to this method, right? One is we've got to recognize that we have more capacity to tend to the things that our system did not give us credit for in the past because it believed, and we have to just trust it, that in the past we couldn't tend to that. So right off the bat, we need to acknowledge that our mental being thinks we have a very small bandwidth of what we can work with, right? A very little window of tolerance. And we're going to ask our system to trust that we actually have a bigger level of tolerance with us. And if we feel we don't, if we feel like it's still kind of true that this particular topic or this particular thing is something that we will struggle to work with that bandwidth, or it would feel more helpful to have somebody holding and being with us in that sacred space, than reaching out to create that more space with us by working with the professional of your choice, right? And once we can recognize that we have more space, we have more capacity to work with what in the past our system said, yeah, no, we don't, then we can start to call forward the support of our body, our heart, and our soul beings, right? That they can help hold that space within ourselves, to witness those sensations, right? To experience what is the mental being was afraid at some point was too much, right? But we can actually start to work with that in a beautiful, safe way, right? And then once we are there, we can start to give ourselves the gift of really allowing that pain and that trance of unworthiness to keep us from further isolating, either within our own system. Nope, 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 nope. Like I was doing, I was like this weird little island, right? These huge sections of me were not a part of me. I had isolated them, I had kicked them out. And I know for me at this point, I realized that one, working on my own and my own contemplation and self reflection with these practices, that I was, doing some really shadowy stuff with it. And I needed somebody there to kind of help hold me lovingly accountable for when I was bypassing, right? When I was, doing these weird twists and turns instead of really pausing and leaning into that and becoming more vulnerable. So for me, this was a huge part of bringing in beautiful practitioners to work with me. This is when I found my beautiful spiritual director. He's been with me for years and years now. This is when I started to allow myself to be held and to be vulnerable, to be seen by an outside being other than myself. So again, that's why I include those hotline numbers on there, additional to reaching out to working with me by all means. But everybody, has their own different things of what they want to do. And so I wanted to make sure those were there. And when that happens, you get to work with another key concept. And this is this concept of titration and intentional pauses and allowing your self work to focus on more topics in addition to working with the pain. So when you hear the words titration, you're usually going to hear it in a somatic thing of being like, we're going to breathe into it, just go far enough in, and then we're going to come back out of that sensation. So we're going to go from, leaning into what's happening into my left hip, and then I'm going to come back out and focus on my breath. And then I'm going to go back in and lean a little bit further and come back in. And so it's usually talking about within that very same session of whenever you're working with the pain. I like to invite clients into a different way of working with titration. I like to invite them into what I call growing your self-work practices, topics and themes of what you work with. So unburdening our system and working with the pain points, it's exhausting work. It's heavy lifting. Of course, why wouldn't some part of us just want to numb out, tap the button, try to avoid it? And why wouldn't another part of us just want to be like a bulldozer and like say, let's rip the Band-Aid off, let's move as quickly as we can, let's get it done and get to the other side so we can feel better, right? Because it's linked to that idea that until this pain is gone, until it's alleviated itself, I can't be happy. I can't be healthy. I can't have a fun, beautiful, full life. And we want to undo that whole link, right? Because it's not real. We want our practices to also have balance and wholeness in our life, in our actual how we work with ourselves. So this is the kind of crazy thing that I really encourage clients to work with. And I finally brought it into my work, is that Our practices, yes, they're going to have incredibly deep, somber, tearful moments. And they don't have to be all that every single time we work with ourselves. In fact, that's not balanced, right? So it also comes into this question, do we allow ourselves to engage in practices that prioritize topics like enjoyment, excitement, play, laughter, investigation, movement, flexibility, connection, all these other beautiful healing components that are a part of our life too. And so I invite my clients to set up times where they're going to work with balance within their session. And it kind of comes off of where I used to do like horse work back in the day. I would have what I call undemanding time of just playing with them or sitting with them in the pasture and grazing with them, where I was journaling and they were munching and we would move together. And then the working time, like working on a certain topic or skill or developmenting something. And then even like passenger rides where I could be riding them if that's something that they wanted to do or they asked for, without a huge like agenda attached to it. So having this really balanced relationship where it wasn't every time they saw me, I was like, do a 20-meter circle, do this, do that, and ride, and then like love you, and then bye. And so there was no balance in that relationship, right? Well, we want to have balance in our relationship with ourselves too. If every time we show up to do a practice, if every time I pick up my journal here, my beautiful journal, I'm only doing the pain points that are in it, I'm not going to want to show up there very often. I'm going to start to try to avoid myself. I'm going to have a hard time doing it. So bringing in like drumming and play and adventure walks and companionship. One of your practices might be to reach out to a friend and meet them for coffee, or to go for a walk together, or to go to the library, or just like hang out on a call together while each of you are working. So you're not working in silence, by yourself if you work from home. It's allowing yourself to say, hey, those are a part of my self-work practices too. And when we set up time that says, yes, I'm going to work with the pain points and I can work through the RAIN process with it, or, another compassionate inquiry version with it, and I also am going to set up time to honor the other aspects of me and commit to them and tend to those and honor them equally, right? What you'll notice is that a beautiful shift starts to happen when we take those moments to really feel into that those parts matter too. We want to titrate our life with, yes, not bypassing the big stuff, the pain points, right? But also not bypassing the joy, the laughter, the love. When we start to do this, all of a sudden, our self-work practice becomes something that feels like a gift to ourselves, right? They stop feeling that pressure. I got to get this done. I got to get to the other end so I can fix my problems so that then I can live my life. Now we're in double binds. Now we're into promised land thinking, and that ends us in a never-ending feedback loop. It's not super fun, right? When we can shift over here, we start to really work with our life and ourselves through this beautiful, rhythmic joy, laughter, weeping, loving, and our system starts to have more compassion on its own. It doesn't see the pain parts of us as a threat, something that we have to lob off and bypass to keep going, right? Or beat into submission back into a corner of us, right? Instead, we can start to shift into really truly having love and compassion for all the different aspects of us. Those that are experiencing a pain, a constellation of different somatic sensations and experiences that feel trapped, pressure and push. And we can also experience the parts of us that are in joy, organically allowing ourselves to grow more laughter, more connection, more enjoyment, and that the pain points are going to be there too. And we no longer have to be slingshotting ourselves back and forth in this unrealistic idea that if we're doing this healing thing right, we shouldn't have pain. And so the practices for this week is the starting point of working with Teresa's quote, shifting our attachments that you might have to believing that pain is wrong, so that you can begin to awaken from the trance of unworthiness and go from shrinking your world and being locked into those unhealthy, do not feel good double binds, right? That either try to avoid, run away, suppress, or combat the pain that was within you as your only two choices for working with pain. So as you move throughout this week, see if you can invite your system to shift from seeing pain within yourself or another and equating that as to being something's wrong. Instead, let's see if we can open up to some rain, right? The pause to be willing to, one, shift to seeing that pain as a simple constellation of sensations and experiences, recognizing that we need to ask ourselves, can we pause, gain some space in here to witness what is going on, allow ourselves, to be willing to accept that this experience is what it is and not write a story or judge why it's there, how it got there. None of that shadow detective, put it down. I investigate, turn towards the sensations and experiences with interest, care, and curiosity, and N, nurture and tend to what you might find as a result of that self-compassion and be willing to move into flow with that. So let's start this practice now, shall we? Just take a moment. Just breathe in and out. We've kind of been around a pretty big topic. I've hit a few key points, right? And we're just starting this process. This took me like a good bit, a few years to undo what I did in the first 10 years of my spiritual journey, right? So we're going to bring love and compassion to ourselves. So just take a moment and allow your breath to bring you into this present moment. If it feels good to you, open up to that Reiki energy. And we want to bring awareness to our system right now, to our body, our mind, our heart, and our soul. And we're going to ask on a scale of 1 to 7, 7 being the most like immense, like intense thing ever, and 1 being like pretty neutral. We're going to ask your body to bring forward something that's like a 2 or maybe a 3 at the most, right? We don't need to go straight for this no pain, no gain. We're going for the gusto, we're trying to befriend our system here. That being said, I trust your guidance, but I invite you to be kind. And just open up to what might be present in and around your system right now with the sensation or the clustering, the constellation of a pain that's at like a 1 or a 2 or a 3. Low end of the spectrum. And let's start with R. Just recognize what is going on with the sensation. Where is it in and around your body? Or what are some of the descriptive words for it? So that might be like a somatic word like tight or pulsing, itchy, numb, tingly, tangled, frayed. Does it have a color? Does it have a size? Is it like the size of a continent, or is it like itty bitty like a pea? Does it have a smell to it or a taste? Does it have a sound to it? We want to bring in all of our 5 senses. Now open up to allowing, accepting that whatever we found in here as we were recognizing, as we were observing, gaining a little distance between that sensation and us, that whatever's there with this constellation, it is what it is. And if there's a story attached to it, see if you can ask it to back up. Like, thank you so much for that story. I appreciate that little mental being part. Step back, please. I'd like to talk more directly to that sensation. Now open to I, investigating. What if we can accept that this is here and we bring compassion? What else is here? Are there any other thoughts or protective parts or stories? Like if it had a little thought bubble above its head, what would be filling in that bubble right now? What is also present within these sensations? Like if we open to our heart being, are there emotions or another sensation like, oh, wow, this one over here is actually linked to this and this and this. And also from that beautiful heart being, what needs are held within that sensation? Too much, too soon, frozen, not heard, neglected, told it was right or wrong or bad. And then nurture. What would be helpful? Ask it, right? Just sit and wait. This is the hardest part about this one is we can't just jump to solutions. Just be with it. Try to let go of that agenda. Ask the soul being. This is the one that part of us that can doesn't have agendas. It's not locked into an outcome. So ask that beautiful soul being of yours for guidance and support on what would be helpful to begin to tend to. If it wants to shift, how would it like support shifting, unwinding, and releasing some of those trapped or frozen or irregular energies that are stuck in it? Maybe you see a flash of a boundary, something that needs to be reinforced. Maybe you see a belief system that's just outdated, holding this all in place and it's ready to be released, dissolved. Maybe the body wants a nice little gentle stretch. You might get an image of a beautiful bath, so it might want to like a little salt bath. Or you need to go for a walk and just breathe, accept. Just invite your system to really reach out to you, to treat you as a trusted friend and companion. And maybe even you're giving that image, like to reach out to a trusted friend or companion or to a beautiful professional that you like to work with to help hold this. Like it's saying, hey, we want a bigger container. We want more space, right? Maybe I just saw like this image of this like just laughing and just being like, wow, that really that's real, you know? And can I bring a little bit more compassion to myself that way? To not take things so seriously and so personally. What is meeting you in this space at this time? And when you're ready, I invite you to just set this intention for this week, our soulful practice for this week. Just pause and breathe. That is our intention this week, to pause. When I find myself recognizing that I am witnessing or working with pain through judgment, that something is wrong and it needs to be shifted, can I pause and ask my awareness to seek rain first, right? To bring in compassion and curiosity to what is happening in this moment, to invite your intention to be guided to recognizing what else is happening, right? That's the R. A, allowing yourself to shift from bracing or fighting or running away to open up to allowing yourself to investigate, I, with compassion and curiosity, and then inviting yourself to engage in the flow of nurturing and the parts of you that you find in that allowing and that recognizing and that investigation through that compassion and that love and kindness, and allowing them to guide you into what movements and actions will best support you and the other. Just take a moment, just set that intention, invite in that Reiki support to be with you, to feel that you are not alone. And even just like invite your field to gain its space, take up its space, like in front of you, behind you, out to the sides, above and below. Just really opening up. And so it is. Amen, amen, amen. Peace, peace, peace. So I hope this concept that Tara lovingly brings forward, that pain is not wrong, and the resulting shifts and changes that come when we accept that concept in the soulful practice of rain is helpful for you in kind of starting to bring more space into your system that allows you to work with that excess pain in a different way so it doesn't add more suffering and more pain to what might be present with you. I hope that this practice is helpful this week. I'd love to know how this very simple mindset shift really kind of ripples out and changes things for you, and maybe how you work with yourself and even work with others when those painful aspects of you might be present. And also bring in that titration, that ability to also honor and work with and recognize and allow the joyful moments to be there too with you throughout this week. So offering you light, love, and joy on your journey, Michelle Holling Brooks with Unbridled Change.